Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, Rays, and today we're taking a look at the JP side update. The global update, well, the global update is the global update, and I'm sure everybody is out there, well, some of you are out there trying to pull for Victoria and enjoying the experience that is pulling, of course, because, you know, there's always those times when you get unlucky, but those times you get really lucky and you think, why can't I get lucky on the other banners too? Anyway, we on the JP side have gotten a bit of an update, including a couple of new things, such as the newly added class match, which is basically kind of a special week in live PvP. So if you are super excited for live PvP, well, I guess this is the event for you. I'm not overly interested in it, as in not even interested at all, but hey, some people out there are definitely going to be interested. But really what we're here to talk about tonight is, of course, our brand new undownloaded banners, which are to do with our brand new male UR character and a female SSR, or MR for you globalers, and whether or not they are any good. So, first of all, I think I'm going to talk about the MR tonight, just because out of the two of them, this is the one that I feel a little more conflicted about whether or not she is good. Because first of all, when I heard about this character, I was like, okay, a light-based, oh, she's kind of a magic tank. Interesting. Not quite sure how that's going to go, but first of all, taking a look at her TMR, it is a magic strong sword. However, you're probably still going to want something like Adelard's sword, or potentially maybe just going with the sleep sword. Nagnarok, probably not the best for magic at all, so I think there are much better options than even her own TMR, and that kind of brings us back to talking about her in general. And I'm not just going to go here, I'm actually just going to go into the menu and show off Alum's pre-built unit, because that kind of gives you an idea of her stats a little bit better, because there is a level 80 version, so that gives us a little bit of a look at it. So the first thing you're going to note, for level 80 MR rarity character, she is actually, interestingly enough, pretty high in terms of the HP category. Her HP is actually really good. It's actually kind of just, I'm a little impressed that it is as good as it is. Other things you'll note, her speed are okay, her movement is generally fine, although she is running, of course, a thief passage, especially if I can bring it up. There it is, thief and quick. Her movement up +1 in quickness gives her generally okay stats overall, I think. And just taking a look at her, a couple things of note. For being, she is a primarily magic-based damage dealer. She is not a physical damage dealer. She is a magical damage dealer. And even with her own TMR, as you can see, her magic stat is not incredibly impressive. And that's the thing. She has some really interesting stuff in her kit by the fact that she is combined Spellblade / magic tank / math, mathematician / anyway. Now, this makes for a pretty interesting combination, because it does mean that in her kit she does have some really good actual like AoE attack. She has basically kind of the Adira treatment, except she has it for essentially light-based attacks, which, as you can tell, or as you might think, given the amount of dark characters that there are in potentially PvP and just boss enemies, a light element magic nuker is kind of interesting, you know, given the fact that you can modify either the level 3 height or the level 4 level into being one level lower to potentially match a little bit better to what enemies you are fighting. What's really interesting here is I think that there is potential in her kit if you can supply enough of a magic stat, and currently I'm just not entirely convinced that there is enough magic stat to really make her good offensively. As for defensively, that's where we kind of got to take a look just a little bit more here. Now, one thing you're going to note, she has an incredible amount of magic damage resistance. She's actually really, really good against anything magical. She's even has some sword resistance as well as some shooting resistance, but if she is up against a piercer or a fist user, she will take extra damage. And that's the thing. Given that her agility doesn't seem incredibly great for what you're getting, really kind of just think that she will be outsped and potentially killed by a lot of different characters, such as defense piercers, such as Venera, or even potentially Stern, who I think that she is kind of a counter to. Because the other thing here is, if you look at the general, like, look at this TMR for a second. It has no aim on it. She doesn't also seem to have really anything that's going to help her with aim. So even if you can get her to the point where she is outputting a fair amount of damage, because her light-based elemental spells aren't necessarily holy, which get around the whole, evade unit thing, there's a good chance she just misses and then potentially gets killed. And I think that is a major problem, because evade units are still a thing. They are not uncounterable and unbeatable, but they are just generally, they are still out there, and you do have to fight them. Taking a look at her main job, the other thing is, while I think there is some, some pretty good stuff here in terms of a Spellblade, the range on most of it just probably isn't quite good enough. The thing also to mention is her Master ability, which gives her hate from the start of battle. I do hope that this becomes a thing where we start seeing this on more potential tanks in the future, because I think it's pretty darn valuable of an ability to have, but is it really going to be enough for this unit to be super good? Not really. She doesn't have almost anything protecting her defensively outside of armor and equipment. The other thing is that while her spirit is good, it just feels like she's missing too much physical, and her stats really just can't overly compete with a UR. So I'm going to give her a general, ooh, this is interesting note, but hard build her to counter something in whatever meta you think that is out there. Probably not. Probably not. I do also believe that there was a little bit of a mention about the fact that her initial AP is also pretty low. Even like her max AP is 96 with an initial AP of 17, which just isn't that much when you're going into battle. So you're going to have to be spending time to get the AP before you can start using these abilities as well. So I definitely don't consider this as good as Adara. And yeah, there are better tanks out there. But an interesting one, they did try something different, and I will give them credit for that. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the Thunder UR, who, while his Japanese name seems to translate out to skull, I do believe he has like a skahar or something like that. I have not memorized it, but taking a look at him, first of all, the thing I am going to note is that this character is very much built for DPS. He does have some protection stuff for himself. Not only that, but he has kind of an interesting little mix. So moving on, we're going to talk about so I've talked about this earlier, but his three jobs are Black Mage, Magician, and Time Mage. Magician is apparently what the middle one is called. Now, taking a look at his kit in general for Black Mage, he actually does have, decent range as you would expect from a mage. Flare and Thunder Elemental spells, which are good because he is a Thunder Elemental mage. You want to bring him against potentially water units. All of that is really, really nice and potentially really strong. Looking at his Magician as well, he also has the more toughness abilities that are super important. That made Kryl just so darn good. Whenever this class shows up in a mage, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a head turner. And it does have the nice forward-facing, just hit multiple enemies, and is anti-evasion, so I think that it is generally pretty strong. Looking at both his master ability as well as his passives, he is basically kind of all in on the magic, like specifically all in on planking right now, just on magic damage. Like I said, he is a DPS, and I'm just trying to find. So magic power plus 20% is his master ability, combined with ability activation down of 20%, which means that he'll be just essentially a really fast caster, which means he'll get his DPS off, the enemy shouldn't have time to move, should be totally fine. As you can see, the other thing to note is that his defense is really, really good off the top of his head, and also making mention of his Time Mage subclass, he also has such things as Comet, Haste, and Quick and Slow Counter. Why are all of these things good? Slow Counter apparently is generally good if you are against certain bosses, because while Slow may be blocked, Slow Counter may not, and that may be potentially useful to get a leg up on the boss. So Slow Counter is pretty interesting, but Quick, just setting a ally's CT to 100 is pretty darn valuable, so I think that's really good. His Limit Burst, as I mentioned before, is basically a 3-hitter AoE Thunder Elemental ability. If we just go in right here, you can see there is the pattern of it. Basically does eat up 69 AP, so it is basically like the Medina LB, where you're going to be spending a lot, but probably going to make him a really good farm unit. Just to talk a little bit about his strong points, so he can be supported by the Time Mage ability. Obviously, that does provide him with a little more support, where he's basically looking like a DPS. While I do think that is a strength, I also should mention that I think that's potentially a weakness, because I think if you're the main part of a unit's kit is just so heavily focused on DPS, that's kind of where you want that unit to be. But if you don't have the like the amazingness of just having a ton of different units, hey, guess what? Being able to have a little bit of flexibility is pretty good. Has many wide area of attacks, most of all I think being his Limit Burst, which is just generally good. And just to talk a little bit about it while we get ready to transition in here, he does have pretty good magic resistance. That does potentially eliminate one of the problems I saw with him. I was really worried about his matchup with Marial, who is a Earth Elemental Mage who is pretty like common to see in this game, especially in PvP. So with an Earth Elemental Mage also being out there, Thunder Elemental Mage is potentially really dangerous for him, so that is not necessarily good. Now, where his kit falters a little bit, as you can see, is that he is weak to basically everything else. He is weak to Slash, he is weak to Pierce, he is weak to Impact as well, and that is just going to make him a little bit more fragile. I think that it does balance out with the general fact that he can get a really high amount of defense, just like Marial can. But in terms of being weak to elements, it does make me rethink about potentially who this unit is going to be really good against, because Marial will counter him versus Elemental, whereas a unit like Ketone will have a weapon type advantage, and overall, like, it makes him kind of this unit that is generally good in a lot of matchups, because he's just, you know, a high DPS. But it also makes me potentially think that he is not actually really that good, because he does not have, he feels a little bit more generally good everywhere, but not exactly a master of anything, and that's really hard to say. There is also the general problem that apparently one of the things that Ultima brought up in my notes is the fact that his luck is pretty darn low for a unit in the game. Not having a ton of luck in his kit, it is going to be hard for him to hit. It's going to be hard for him to gain an advantage on some of the other units out there. But also it could generally be a little bit to do with the 2.1 update to deal with units movement that could end up hurting this unit just a little bit more. But overall, well, before I get his overall, let's talk about his TMR as well. And for that, I kind of got to switch over here. So let's go Here it is. So 250 HP, 8 hit, 10 critical, 8 mental. Pretty nice little piece of equipment. For his own TMR, just for him, I think it's generally pretty nice because it does have a little extra spirit. I think that he kind of needs that since primarily if he is in a mage matchup, I very much doubt you're going to end up against Adira a lot of the times, especially in PvP. I think you're going to end up a lot of the times against Marial, and that is super dangerous, and him and Medina, that might be a little bit more of a toss-up to who ends up winning, but gonna have to wait and see. The ability on it is Magic Pulse, which consumes own HP and greatly increases allies' magic power for 3 turns. This is interesting. Sacrificing his own HP for a magic boost basically puts this TMR in an entirely mage party or a mostly mage party if you want to get the most out of it. I'm not overly convinced that this is super great. I haven't seen how much HP it eats up, but it would have to be a pretty darn big boost to counterattack that. And that kind of brings me back around to talking about Kroll, Skull, Crowhara, blah, 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 blah. I'm probably just going to, just for all future videos, I'm just going to call him Skull. A lot of people have also asked, who is Marial? Well, this is Marial. And I want to bring up Marial for a second because in terms of the comparison of Marial versus this new unit, should you get both? Should you get neither? Should you get one or the other? And to that, I'm definitely going to put my recommendation in the Marial camp for a couple of reasons. One, she came earlier, so if you already have her, there's a good chance that you are getting her maxed. Second of all, Marial is, in terms of utility, a much better unit because it's pretty darn straightforward as to where this unit needs to focus on. Her anti-evasion attacks of both the tank, both her abilities, as well as her limit burst, reducing magic resistance, as well as just the fact that she has Holy in her kit, which is another way to just get rid of evade units. But overall, Marial just has a generally what I feel like is a much nicer kit for utility, especially in PvP, because a lot of the times you don't want to bring an Ayaka with you because Ayaka's AI is primarily focused on supporting and not damage dealing. She will always kind of just pick that support over doing DPS, and you don't want to necessarily lock out all of her support skills. Whereas this unit is primarily a DPS who can pull out healing magic when it is useful. That is something that I have found that is really incredibly useful with Marial, is the fact that I have had guild wars where going into round 2 my units had low HP and Marial was able to heal them up, making me able to survive and win against other enemies, and that makes her just really valuable. It's not just holy, it is the fact that she does have healing and she is a pretty good healer as well. I think that she is just the better unit overall, not just because of elemental advantage, but also because of the fact that the healing should never be underestimated. It is a great thing to have a unit that can do backup healing, that can just have that right there. And yeah, to that extent, I just have to give it probably over to Marial as opposed. Now, if you didn't have a mage, this mage is plenty great. I think he is overall a really solid unit, a really good DPS, and I think he will be potentially decent in arena as well as everything else, depending on who his matchup is. But do I think he is straight power creep on the mages we already have? No, I think that there is enough things tweaked and changed in his kit that he definitely has some advantages, but I can see the disadvantages as well. And just to show it off, here is his limit burst, because I'm sure that everybody has been waiting to see that. So yeah, there it is. General review of this banner. While I don't think anything about this banner is bad, I think that Maria is potentially really interesting, and Skull is a incredibly strong UR mage with a new element that we haven't seen, and particularly heavily focused on DPS. If you've already been pulling a lot either between Blingstern or Glassy and Laswell, or Lyra, and you are just burnt out on banners, this is probably a pretty safe banner to skip. Nothing wrong with this character at all, but I think that given the amount of high-pressure banners we've seen recently, and potentially just how burnt out you might be after the half anniversary, this is probably a good one to just relax a little bit on. But hey, if you want to try and multi after him, go for it. I'm too tired. And too spent on Glassy and Laswell. So anyway, that's my opinion. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Take care.